I didn't even want to jump in the first place, but then I found myself closer to death than I had ever been at any moment in my life before. But would I do it again? We just jumped in the North Atlantic Ocean in January, and my hands were so cold they turned blue. At the start of my 13-week trip across Europe, my friend and I fell in love with the social environment provided to us by a hostel. Just dozens of people every day, and I'm not exaggerating. We were meeting so many people. Also, there was a ball pit. I really liked the ball pit. On one day in particular, we met this girl who was volunteering at the hostel, and she invited Brian and I to go surfing with her the next day. And the next morning, Brian and I got up early, we put on our warmest clothes because it was actually kind of cold out, and we hopped on the nearest train and go to the furthest east stop, which was Cascais. And soon enough, we were on a train to Cascais. All was right in the universe. We were on a train to the eastern coast of Portugal to meet up with some friends to surf some waves. What could possibly go wrong? So I didn't think getting there was going to be a problem. But as soon as we got off the train at Cascais, we had to get an Uber to go to the eastern coast. It was about like a 15-minute drive, so not that big of a deal. But we got denied by our Uber 3 times. We're sitting there going, it's an hour-and-a-half walk to get there, and by that time, the people we were going with were going to be done anyway, and so it wouldn't even matter. So Brian suggested that we take in the full aroma of the ocean and walk down to this rocky beach that Cascais was on the shore of. So we found this stellar rock. The beaches here were beautiful. There were these cliffs. I loved them. I sang a song about them. My eyes adore you. Oh, I've never met a cliff like you. My eyes adore you. This was going to be our spot to film part of our YouTube interview that we were doing for our channel at the time. We found some disagreement. Brian thought that the wind was too severe and we weren't going to be able to hear our voices. He wanted to use this opportunity to completely immerse himself in this experience of being in nature by jumping off the cliff. We disagreed. So we had a dilemma. Firstly, I did not want to jump, okay? It's January. We wore our warmest clothes to get there because the air was so cold already. A cliff jump seemed like the worst thing that we could do. So after that kind of this dialogue of going back and forth about what we should do, we came to a compromise and decided that we were going to do both things. We sat down with our camera and we made a video, and then came time to jump off a cliff. Issue number 1, Brian doesn't have a swimsuit. He was very much contemplating jumping off with less than appropriate clothes. But then Brian went on the beach and he found some guy's swimsuit that he had left there when he went to go skinny dipping. I still think about this sometimes. Welcome. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this at all. I don't want to do this at all. I don't want to do this even a little bit. Oh, it's so cold. And then we jumped. As soon as I jumped in, my immediate thought was how cold the waters actually were. With a quick glance, Brian and I just swam as fast as we could, and we were just going because this water was really freaking cold. I started to get a little tired, and so I slowed down to catch my breath. This was a bad idea, probably one of my worst. My arms and legs started to go numb, and I started to fall asleep. Now, I don't know if you know this, but this is how you drown in cold waters. But I knew I had to push through because my demise was inevitable. The water was much colder than I expected, and this was a much longer swim than I anticipated. And I was falling asleep. I wasn't even halfway yet. So I was holding the GoPro in my hand, and as I was swimming, I was kind of swimming like this. I realized that this was slowing me down. And so I was like, $400 of technology, not worth it. I let go. And then I started swimming like real, and it was still strapped to me on my wrist. It would catch the currents, and it would actually slow my arm down, and I couldn't swim as fast as I could when I was holding it, so I had to think fast. At this stage, I was probably about halfway through. Basically, I have no feeling in my arms and legs, and even though the currents are extremely powerful, I could feel my heart screaming at me because it was beating so hard because my body was in shock. And I thought, okay, God, this is where I die. Then something incredible happened. As I was swimming, I looked down, and about 15 feet below me, I could see the sand of the beach starting to rise up, and I knew that I was at least closer than I was before, and that if I could just make it to where it was 8 or 7 or 6 feet, I wouldn't be a fish out of water, or a man in water, I guess. That beach that I saw below me was all the encouragement that I needed to push my absolute hardest. And I started swimming like I've never swam before. I swam with every muscle I didn't even know that I had, mostly because they were all numb. But before I knew it, I was walking on sand. Brian and I were pleasantly greeted by this warm breeze that we actually thought was cold before, but compared to the water, it was like a sauna. So Brian quickly returned his stolen swimsuit, and then we sat down to catch our breath. That was the worst idea of my life. Shit. Dude, I was getting so cold, I couldn't swim anymore. So it probably took about 4 to 5 hours for our body temperature to return to normal, and on the train ride back, I slept the entire way. I was just so tired. The next day, we decided to look up how cold the waters actually were to see if I was just being a wuss. Here were our findings. Over 1,500 people drown in the frigid waters of the Titanic. That water was -2 degrees Celsius, which is about 28 degrees Fahrenheit. On the day that Brian and I took a plunge, it was -1 degree Celsius, which is about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which is still below the freezing point of water. So in the end, we found peace in our compromise. We got our video. We were both bonded by this shared near-death experience, but we were happy with our decision to value our friendship over our comfort levels. And it turns out Brian did not have the same experience that I had in the water. Not only did he not even almost fall asleep in the water, he liked it. If I can quote him here, yeah, I'd probably do it again.
I would do it again.
I learned a valuable lesson that day. Don't cliff jump in January, ... unless you have to because you're being chased by a bear, period. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a like. And if you didn't like today's video, then just leave a like. You never have to watch me again, but just, that would be nice. Anyway.